But here we are again. And I saw some people that said they might, when they came in and saw the handout, they thought about walking back out. And there's been a whole debate, I guess, as to, is there one person this is pointed to, and what's the deal? And I could go back to the story from last Sunday evening. I'm not going to do that. Now, I did tell you months ago that there were 40 of these. And we're not even going to cover the 40 in this kind of on-again, off-again look. It's been a little while since we've come back around to it. I made a few changes to even the way we're approaching it tonight. But as I looked at the original list, there were some that were a bit too overlap, for instance. And so I've combined some and changed some based on my studies, even from some of these Proverbs this evening. But here's how you might think about this. You might think of it as 7 ways to lose friends and negatively influence other people in your life. Anybody know what I'm referencing by that? Okay, all right. Dale Carnegie, right? The way to win friends and influence people. Well, here's 7 ways to do the opposite without even trying. You don't have to try that hard, and it will happen. But some words of clarification this evening. And by the way, both of these, or neither of these, are based on questions I've received, okay? You know, sometimes people think, well, why is he clarifying? Maybe somebody asked him a question. And that does happen. But these are things I've been thinking about as I came back to this idea of reasons why people may not like me, or like us, like you, like us as humans. This is not about a popularity contest. We're not chasing likability or popularity. It's about being the kind of people that other people want to be around and to be drawn to. And so you might even, if you wanted to use some alliteration there, you could say it's not popularity or being popular. It's about having qualities like prudence and patience and being peaceable, being approachable. That's what this is about as we look at it a bit closer tonight. And it is also not about any failure. And I know we've said this before, but I think it's worth re-mentioning or reiterating this evening that you can look at this list, and I know we've joked around about, well, I passed some of them, I'm okay on some, I don't know about these other 2 down here at the bottom of the list, maybe I don't fare so well. But we don't want to be too hard on ourselves as we look at things like this from the Proverbs, and that if I can say, well, yeah, I've done all 7 of these before, that's not the point. It's not about any failure, it's more about our overall behavior, who we are as people. The source of this original list, the way he put it was, you don't want any of these to dominate your life. If your life is dominated, or maybe a less aggressive term would be if your life is characterized as a whole by any one of these, then you've got some work to do for sure, or to be careful tonight. We have some work to do. This is not about pointing fingers. What's the old thing, right? If you point a finger, you've got how many pointing back at yourself? Let's take a look at 7 more, though. 7 more reasons why people may not like us. And I invite you to take out your Bible and go with me to Proverbs 15. That's where our first passage will be from. I won't have the overview on the screen. It's a bit difficult to fit all 7 in there. And these are a different way of organizing things anyway, aren't they? So let's just jump into the first one. And we are, as always, we can't spend a lot of time on each one. We're going to hit the highlights of these 7 for the evening. And I tried to keep the pattern going, though, of the way you think about these, where you add almost the first part of the question, am I, and then you fill in the blank. And so that works for the first few. The first one is, in that way of thinking, am I too loud? Too loud. Don't be too quick to raise your hand or not raise your hand on that one. Too loud. Let's look at Proverbs 15:1. And this is one of those quotable quotes of the Proverbs. Proverbs 15, verse 1. We've got another one from chapter 17 we're going to look at in a moment. But consider these 2 options. And this seems to be set up where you're responding to someone else. You're responding to tension that is already rising. And the way you respond to that changes the temperature of the rest of this interaction. And so he says this, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. You might also add this question. You might ask, when it comes to confrontation, when it comes to even just a disagreement or a misunderstanding that someone brings to me, am I someone that escalates? Am I an escalator? Right? Or am I someone that at least tries to de-escalate? I don't think that's a piece of machinery, a de-escalator, but if it were, that would work here. Which one am I? Am I more likely to add more fuel to the fire of this tension with someone else? Or am I more likely at least to try to use something peaceable and more quiet, even in my tone, that might help to put the fire out? If you want some biblical examples, you could go back to the book of Judges. And in Judges, there are two people that respond differently. And you go back to Judges 6, 7, 8, and you're reading about Gideon. Gideon has this more gentle way as he interacts with God's people. For instance, there's a time when the people of Ephraim come to Gideon, and the way he responds is rather gentle. Now, there's another judge, Jephthah, who later interacts with the same people, and he responds more harshly, more coldly to them, and the consequences follow from there. That's the way this works, isn't it? That I have a far greater tendency to settle things peacefully when I respond in that way. And there's something about even the volume that you use. And it's weird, isn't it? Have you ever seen this where someone's starting to get heated and the other person, instead of raising their voice, they actually intentionally, or perhaps it becomes subconscious, they actually lower their voice? It's weird, but it works. Now look at Proverbs 17. Proverbs 17, verses 27 and 28. A couple of sections over in the Proverbs. Quite a few of the 7 tonight are focused on our words. And there's something to that, isn't there? I mean, there are proverbs about the power of words. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. We get this emphasis that there is great power for good or ill, depending on what we do with these words. And I appreciate Shane this evening. I told him what we were doing. I didn't give him specifics. And he started with humility, and we're going to be there before the evening's over. And then we had references to this concept of the way that we harmonize with others. You'll also find this in the Proverbs. This is one of those. Okay, we're making our way to Proverbs 17:27. Sometimes just learning how to control in the sense of limiting what we say. It's not what we say itself or how we say it in tone. It's also, and I said what there, but it's also the quantity of words that we use. Sometimes it's better to pause for a moment, to collect our thoughts, to cool our heads. What's the old saying? Calm, cool, and collected, instead of harsh and hasty. Proverbs 17, verse 27 says, "Whoever restrains his words has knowledge, and he who has a cool spirit is a man of understanding. Even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise." I think we have a saying about that, don't we? And then when he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent. It is rare that hearts that are heated, it is rare for them to be cooled by loud voices. Or to put it another way, raised voices rarely calm heated hearts. I'm going to share one more thing with you, and then we do have to look at the second one this evening. Now, I almost quoted Taylor Swift for this sermon, her song, "You're being too loud, you need to calm down," but I don't know how well that one actually fits. It's a bit out of context. And so, instead, we're going to quote Carrie Underwood tonight, all right? But I thought about her song that says, "In between the coats in the closet, she held on to that heart-shaped locket, staring at a family flawless, but it ain't a pretty picture tonight. Mom and Daddy just wouldn't stop it, fighting at the drop of a faucet. Cuts through the walls, catastrophic. She's caught in the crossfire, puts her hands over her ears, starts talking through her tears. She's saying, and she's praying." And then you've got that chorus, "I wish words were like little toy guns. No sting, no hurt, no one. Just a bang bang rolling off your tongue. Yeah, no smoke, no bullets. No kick from the trigger when you pull it. No pain, no damage done." And then the second verse says, "I wish there was a white flag waving, or that they were both just faking. And it was just a game they were playing, like shoot 'em up cowboys. Leave the plastic pistols in the front yard, throw away the scorecard, and just turn off all the noise. And you wonder how many relationships, how many homes, how many businesses, how many churches have fallen apart because of not just words, but also the way we use those words, even the volume. Sometimes people may not like us because we're too loud in volume or in tone or in the way that we approach people in harshness, being too loud. Now, here's the second one. It might be because I'm too sensitive, and I forgot I had that picture up there, that you might have to eat your words later, all right? So watch your words. You saw the picture. If you want the quote, ask me later, all right? You're being too sensitive. Proverbs 12, verse 16. Let's look at that one together. You might also think of the word overly this evening. Am I overly sensitive? The danger is that, on the one hand, we don't want to become these cold, untouched, unbothered people. And we can almost become a shell if we allow that to happen. But on the other hand, we don't want to be people who are easily offended, overly sensitive. You might almost think this is tied right in with the soft answer, isn't it? How I respond to other people, even their attacks, the onslaught of their insults, perhaps. Proverbs 12, verse 16 says this, "The vexation of a fool is known at once, but the prudent ignores an insult." Part of this might look like learning to have tough skin. Maybe on your arm, if you were thinking about it metaphorically, to have tough hands and a tough arm to hold out and receive attacks and harmful, hurtful words. And there's that balance, right? That I need to be someone who's not hurting other people with my words, but I need to be careful about how personal I take things when people do come at me with their words. But I don't want to have a hard heart either. And sometimes we cut ourselves off emotionally, and I'm not going to be hurt by what people do to me. And then that can, if taken to an extreme, then I lose my sympathy and my compassion along the way for people that are hurting. And so that's why I said you might think of it that way, as having tough skin, but a soft heart. I don't want to be too sensitive, but I don't want to lose my sensitivity either. And this one does parallel. I don't think it overlaps too much, but it parallels with one that we've already discussed in previous looks from this list of reasons. But if I'm too sensitive, people may not like me. Here's the third one this evening. What if I have no limits? No limits. Look with me at Proverbs 25. We have a couple of them from Proverbs 25 this evening. Proverbs 25 and Proverbs 20 both ended up with a couple of passages or a couple of verses from them for this evening. Proverbs 25, verses 16 and 17, no limits. You could throw in here codependency. If I'm codependent on other people, that's not a likable trait. But here it says, if you have found honey, eat only enough for you, lest you have your fill of it and vomit. It's a beautiful picture, isn't it? It's all about honey until you get to the last part. And then he says this, and it seems these are connected, that maybe the first one isn't just about what you eat, although you could include that, right? You could include gluttony here, you could include self-control, no limits when it comes to food, but it may be that is more of the picture. You picture that. Picture someone who eats too much honey or too much of something that is too sweet. They're overindulgent and they get a tummy ache. They may even throw up later. That's what that looks, or that's what that is when you invade other people's lives too much. When you have no limits or no boundaries. Verse 17 says, let your foot be seldom in your neighbor's house. Now you could insert there a parenthetical for our culture and say sometimes we've gone the other way. I know we mentioned that a few weeks ago in a sermon, that our culture is so private that we never go to each other's homes anymore. But here, he says, let your foot be seldom in your neighbor's house. Don't go too much, for sure, lest he have his fill of you and hate you. Have you ever overstayed your welcome? Have you ever realized that maybe familiarity does breed contempt after all, right? That people can get too much of us. And that's happened sometimes. That's happened with friendships, right? Two people start to become friends, and one person thinks they're becoming really good friends, and the other person's not so sure yet. And sometimes the whole friendship collapses because of that. Boundaries are healthy. And that's why I use that word healthy here. Both of these verses are about healthy limits or healthy boundaries. If you take verse 16 in a literal way, it's about a healthy relationship to food, especially sweet food. And then a healthy relationship with people, healthy boundaries in my relationships. There's a saying that healthy relationships always include healthy boundaries. Do you know what those boundaries are? For you with other people, do you know what other people in your life, what their boundaries are? Because there is some subjective side to this, or there is a subjective side to this, right? As to how exactly the boundaries are set up in our relationships. But bottom line here is if I'm someone who has no limits, who has no control and is able to hold back or isn't able to hold back, no limits, people may find it difficult to like me. There's number next, or I believe it's number 4. If I'm lazy. Who likes a lazy person, right? Proverbs 20 now. Proverbs 20, verse 4. Here's what the lazy person, or the word that tends to pop up in Proverbs is the word sluggard. The sluggard. Proverbs 20, verse 4 says this about the sluggard, that the sluggard does not plow in the autumn. He doesn't plant in planting season. And I know some of you are in the middle of wheat planting right now. He doesn't do that. And then he will seek at harvest, so maybe it's springtime, harvest time, and have nothing. Now, do you notice here the problem isn't just that this person doesn't put in the work. It's even worse that this is an attitude where they still expect to get something out of it. It's like the college student that misses a ton of classes, but somehow they're still thinking they're going to get all A's at the end of the semester. It's this expectation here of, I'm going to get a reward, I'm going to get something, even though I haven't put in the work. If that's how I behave, where I'm someone who doesn't really do much and is not that dependable and I don't have much of a work ethic, and then especially if I'm someone who doesn't have that, and then the two tend, I guess, to be common together, but I expect to get something, then I might be in trouble. Now, there are times when people are given things. There is the idea of grace where you don't earn something. But as a general principle in life, if you don't put in the work, then you shouldn't expect to get something out of it. Or no input equals no output. Or you could think of it as the same input equals the same output, right? Reaping what we sow. What happens? What kind of a person is that just doesn't really want to do anything, but wants everything given to them? Here's where you could tie, I guess, you could tie a couple of these together. 3 and 4 here. No limits and the codependency idea could easily mesh, unfortunately, with being a sluggard or being someone who is lazy. If I'm lazy, or maybe we should attach the word "to" there. Could we do that? If I'm too lazy, people might not like me. Now here's number 5 for the evening. What if I'm someone who tells whispering words, or a slanderer? You could replace it then with the word gossip or gossiper. Look with me at these Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 10, verses 18 and 19. Look at what they say about the person who shares a bit too much. Proverbs chapter 10, verses 17 and 18. It says that whoever heeds instruction is on the way to the path to life. And I'm reading 17. Yeah. All right. It's 18 and 19 in case you didn't realize that. I didn't. The one, verse 18, who conceals hatred has lying lips. So there you've got the hypocrites. And then the one now who utters slander is a fool. He puts both of those in the same boat. They're in the same basic category of problem. And then verse 19 says, when words are many, so there's that again, that sometimes our trouble is just that we say too much. We talk too much. And if you talk too much, statistically, what's going to happen? You're more likely to say something that you shouldn't. Ever done that? Just started talking and kind of a free exercise of talk with a close friend or a friend, and before you even realize it, you've said things about another person that you really shouldn't have shared, but it's too late. You can't eat your words. You can try. Gossip, slander spreads faster than any other form of communication, and it tends to last longer than any apology can attempt to pull it back. He goes on to say then, when words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent. And then you've got a couple of other verses up there. Proverbs 16:28 is also about the danger of slander. Let's read that one together. Proverbs 16, verse 28. Here's the consequence or danger. It says, a dishonest man spreads strife, and a whisperer, and that's another word for a gossiper, because those tend to be. And I guess we have a paradox here that you want a soft answer to wrath, but you don't want to be someone who's whispering about somebody else. Did you hear? Did you hear what they did? And of course, it's not always said in an actual whisper. Now, if they're in the room, that's when it becomes more actual whisper. But a whisperer separates close friends. Add that one then to that same basic question. How many friendships have been lost because somebody spread a rumor, gossiped about them? And this one works in multiple ways, doesn't it? Sometimes it's because one of the people in this friendship was gossiping about the friend. Sometimes it's because the friend hears gossip about the other person and believes it, and it creates problem in the relationship, or the friendship, the marriage, employee to employer, and all of those different forms of connection in life. And we have our ways of justifying this one, don't we? We say, but it's true. Well, what if it is true? We say they've done something they shouldn't have. Well, if they've sinned, and especially sinned against you, and you want to make something of it, then you need to follow Matthew 18, when Jesus says, go to the person, not go to other people and talk about it. Words have a way of spreading. And here's the practical bottom line is that what I say about you behind your back eventually will get back around to you as well. Words spread, they also hurt. And I saw an article, this was actually several weeks ago, but our culture does this in official ways. They did this years ago with profanity. They came out with these studies that claimed people who use curse words are more intelligent than people who don't. Well, here's the new one. Okay, and I quote, this is the part of the title of the article, is that we need to stop seeing gossip as moral failure and see it for what it is, social intelligence. And with the tagline that said, gossip is smarter than you think. So it's not a problem, it's not an ethical thing or a moral failure, it's just social intelligence. And yet God says a slanderer is somebody who destroys relationships. Is that who I am? I'm somebody that whispers about people behind their back. And then, here's number 6 this evening. Not only am I a slanderer, am I someone with empty words? Do my words tend to exceed my actions? Am I someone who tends to make promises and boast about things, and then my follow-through tends to follow far behind? Think about this one. Am I someone who makes these broad and big ideas made known, but I don't back them up? We go back to Proverbs 25 now. Proverbs 25, verse 14. All right, we're still in sync right now. Proverbs 25, verse 14. And as I read this one and thought about this one, I couldn't help but think about our area of the world. It's another one of those, we don't know anything about this, do we? We don't know anything about big clouds and dark clouds. We don't know anything about the magic wand that tends to float over us where the clouds do this around us. No, we don't know anything about that. Proverbs 25, verse 14 says, like clouds and wind without rain is a man who boasts of a gift he does not give. I wonder how often we as parents have been guilty of this one. And we use phrases like, we'll see, right? I know I've been guilty of that. But if you always say, when asked, what can we do this? Or you think this is going to happen, you always say, we'll see, and it never happens. I know of a phrase used by a couple where they would tell their daughter, well, this is not a promise, this is just a plan. And maybe that's a good way to approach it, all right? You can think about that one a little bit. Just the reminder that we're not saying this is definitely going to happen. This is what we're hoping or planning to happen. You could bring in, this is if the Lord wills, right? We need to be careful about our promises. The other way, let your yes be yes and your no be no. But what if I'm someone who tends to promise big and make claims, but then nothing ever comes of it? The other reference in Proverbs 20, verse 6, is more specific to someone describing themselves in their character. But it's not that difficult to find somebody that will say they have steadfast love. It's not that difficult to find people who claim to be Christians, is it? But who can find someone who is that in reality? That's the dangerous part, isn't it? And it's easy to tell people that you'll do something, and then nothing happens. Maybe part of why I think about parents is because children maybe they have a special way of perceiving that. They're very perceptive about sincerity and truthfulness. They tend to notice hypocrisy easier than we as adults do. And there's more to that for other subjects, of course. But if I'm someone this evening who has empty words, people may not like me. Here's a summary for this one. You could say it in these these simple words. Say less, do more. And you could say that about all of these then. We said there is this impact of don't say too much. Where there's many words, transgressions increase. Well, even more specific to this one, maybe I just need to promise and boast less and just do what I'm supposed to do. Keep my commitments. I also thought about 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 13 this evening. Incidentally, Paul's warning in 1 Timothy 5:13 to the younger widows combines about 3 of our 7 this evening. He says they're always spending their time and going around to other people's houses. Right? What was the warning about that one? They're idle as they do that, or lazy, and they're talking about other people. They're gossiping. So you kind of have 3 right there in one warning in 1 Timothy 5. But here's our last one for the evening. And this is one you might wonder why it didn't make the first of the list. Now, we did say we weren't doing these necessarily in order of priority. But if I'm arrogant, if I'm prideful, nobody likes somebody who's full of themselves. This could tie back with the 6th one, right, of somebody who's full of hot air. And they think there's something. But what happens when the hot air balloon runs out of hot air? Now we know Proverbs 16:18, pride goes before destruction and the haughty spirit before a fall. But what about Proverbs 11, verse 2? Proverbs 11, verse 2. This one says that pride comes and then comes disgrace. But with the humble is wisdom. Arrogance, my ego, will cause me to say things, do things that are hurtful to people. It'll cause me to chase after things that I think are going to build me up and make me look better. And I'll lie, I'll cheat, I'll steal, I'll do whatever if it propels me forward in life. And then one more, Proverbs 29, verse 23. Proverbs 29, verse 23. Do you notice a pattern here? One's pride, verse 23 of Proverbs 29 says, will bring him low. But he who is lowly in spirit will obtain honor. Have you ever seen someone who is being very successful in their endeavors? But it may be that even when they're asked about their goals, that there's a disconnect there. That they're not chasing, it might be financial success, worldly success, whatever. That their goals are more pure than that. And yet they often end up being successful without chasing it, without egotistically reaching higher. And this is one that distances us from everybody. I put James 4 down on the handout, where God is opposed to the proud. If there's anything that God has at the top of his list of things that he dislikes, things that he resists in our hearts, it's always pride. How many other problems are bred in a heart of pride? Go back to our first one this evening with being too loud and a soft answer. And you ask questions like, which is, or even the too sensitive one too, and you ask, which is bigger in my heart? My pride or peace? Pride, instead of building bridges, pride tends to build walls in relationships and maybe even tear down the bridges that have been built or that others are trying to build. You want to keep everybody at arm's length, including God? People may not like me if I'm someone who is arrogant. Those are some more reasons why people may not like us. The Proverbs, even those we looked at tonight, are that. They're relational wisdom from our God. Let's read one more together before Shane leads us in an invitation song. A call to respond to the gospel message about Jesus. A call this evening to respond to the way that we live out, and that was the missing piece from the handout this morning, we live out the gospel in the way that we behave. The gospel of Jesus, the wisdom of Jesus are together in that sense. Proverbs chapter 3, though, verses 3 and 4, and then we'll have our final charge. Proverbs 3, 3 and 4. He says this, "Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Instead, bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. So you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man." We gave bottom lines for each of the 7 this evening. Here's the bottom line for them all. Let other people in your life this week, let them see Jesus in you. May they see Jesus in me as we live this week. Now, let's encourage one another as we stand and sing together.